Hello, we're glad you could join us today for our first official release of Lockdown Live. Each week I will release another episode of this podcast series where we will be joined by a different guest who will share something from their experience during lockdown. Today we are joined by a special guest, Lilia Morris, who is here to talk to us about her lockdown experience. I'm your host, Charlotte Morris, and I will be discussing some of the approaches that Lilia has taken in order to cope with lockdown and make it easier for herself. Lilia has taken up a new hobby, which is knitting, and she will be sharing how she finds this.
My lockdown experience was okay. We found things to do, so it wasn't so boring. It could have been worse, I guess. In lockdown I struggled with the schoolwork if it got too much or overwhelming. It'd also get bad and hard not seeing your friends. I think lockdowns could have worked better and they weren't as effective as they could have been, and it should have been more strict, I guess. Instead we should do a more intense lockdown. I think if we would have gone into a more strict lockdown straight from the start, we would have only been released from it when the cases were gone, then it would have worked better. What inspired me to take up knitting was because my mum used to do it, so she told me it could be relaxing to do and give me something else to focus on in lockdown rather than just sitting around being bored. Knitting helped me because it gave me something to do and distract me. It's also quite relaxing, and it saves you from just sitting around the house doing nothing. It takes my mind off all the sadness. I think I will continue with this hobby as it's something fun to do when you have nothing else to be doing and it keeps you occupied. I want to start a business, and I've started making blankets now and I enjoy it, so I'm going to carry on doing it, and I might even sell them and become a big entrepreneur. I found the most challenging thing about this hobby is when I first taken it up, because it could get confusing and you could forget how to do it properly and get in a tangle. It can also be difficult when you miss a stitch and have to restart. The best part about this hobby is that it is relaxing, and once you get the hang of it, it is easy to do and doesn't take a lot of thought. It can be distracting if you have other things going on in life and it takes you away from it all. And I'm going to be an entrepreneur who sells knitted blankets. Any background information about this hobby, I know that it is used to make clothes. Advice to someone who has never knitted before, I would tell them to get some good needles and some good wool, and to take your time, and don't worry if you get it wrong the first time, because you will get the hang of it eventually. This hobby has completely changed me because I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Taking up this hobby has had an effect on me as a person, as it has given me time to spend time on my own doing something I enjoy, and as during lockdown it's obviously given me time to learn more things about myself, and doing this has helped me do so. Knitting is fun to do, as it can also, as it is fun to do by yourself, but you can also do it with friends or family, and it helps you to bond with them, as you can discuss each other's knitting techniques and so on. When me and my sisters were younger, my mum's friend used to knit us toys and stuff to play with, so I always liked them, so now I would like to make stuff like that for other children that I know. I also think it's good to make things for yourself, as you feel more accomplished than buying a blanket from a shop to look at it and know you've done it yourself. And when you restart another thing that you're knitting, you get excited to see the end result, and it's something to look forward to. I've also in lockdown I also was teaching my little sister how to knit, and that was good, as we were both learning something new and getting along, and neither of us were bored or getting upset in lockdown. If you're thinking of starting this hobby, the best way to start it is with thicker needles, most people would say. However, I started with thinner needles and thinner wool, and I seem to think it works better, so I guess it's up to your personal preference. But my friend learned from YouTube videos, so you don't even need someone else to teach you or be able to know how to do it in your house. You can learn it by yourself. Or if you start and find it tricky, don't quit or worry about it, because you'll figure it out in the end, and as soon as you get the hang of it, it's very easy and comes to you naturally, and you'll enjoy it a lot more. However, if this isn't for you personally, there's other types of the same kind of hobby, like crocheting, which is also good. My sister does that, and she finds it fun too. It's like the same thing, but it can be easy to get a hang of. So if you're struggling with knitting, you could try that instead. If you're thinking of starting this hobby, the best way to start it is with thicker needles, most people would say. However, I started with thinner needles and thinner wool, and I seem to think it works better. So I guess it's up to your personal preference. But my friend learned from YouTube videos, so you don't even need someone else to teach you or be able to know how to do it in your house. You can learn it by yourself. Or if you start and find it tricky, don't quit or worry about it, because you'll figure it out in the end, and as soon as you get the hang of it, it's very easy and comes to you naturally, and you'll enjoy it a lot more. Another thing about this hobby is it can help you with your other skills, because you learn how to use your hands more delicately and how to undo any problems that happen, so it can be good for problem solving. If you're doing this with family members too, it could also be a good chance to look back down your family tree, as it's likely that your grandparents or great-grandparents have done this at some point in their life, as it used to be a common hobby. So doing this with your mum or dad or sisters or brothers could be a good thing, as you could learn more about your family's past and other people in your family that you might not know. But knitting is very therapeutic and relaxing, and it can ease any stress that you're feeling about anything in your life, if it's school or work. So that's why it's good for people that are in school during lockdown, because I know that it can be very stressful and hard to keep on track with, and then it's good to use something to let loose and forget about it for a little while, and then you'd feel better afterwards. For adults, it could also be good, because the stress of work, especially key workers in the lockdown, could feel the stresses of the pandemic, and doing something like this could help them forget about it too, and they would feel better about themselves. Workers in the lockdown could feel the stresses of the pandemic, and doing something like this could help them forget about it too, and they would feel better about themselves.
So that's it from today's episode. Make sure to join us again next week and check the website for upcoming topics. Next week's topic is football, as our guest discusses their most impressive moments whilst watching Man United. Thank you to today's guest Lilia Morris for joining us. We'll see you next week.